All right, we're going to take a look at a few multiplication problems without variables at first. So just looking at mild and medium level problems here. Notice in number 7, I do have 2 square roots. So we can multiply these together. The tooltip at the top is telling us to first multiply coefficients. Conveniently, we don't have any for this first problem, so we don't have to worry about that. But then the product rule is just the idea that we're multiplying the stuff under the radical, so the 27 and the 5. So let's go ahead and do that. 27 times 5 is 135. Not too bad yet. But then we come down to the simplify instruction. So square root of 135, that's all well and good, but we want to check and see if there's a perfect square factor in there somewhere. This is where I recommend having your cheat sheet out, the one with all of the different perfect squares and perfect cubes. 135 is the same as 9 times 15. The reason we're picking 9 is because 9 is our perfect square. There's nothing special about the number 15. The 15 is just there because 9 times 15 gets us 135. The 9 is the important piece here. The reason we want that 9 is because the square root of 9 is just 3. And we now have a simplified radical. Done. So moving on to something a bit more challenging. This is our medium example. Notice now we do have coefficients, the numbers in front. We've got a 3 in front, and we have a negative 2 in front. So this is multiplication. We're going to multiply that 3 and the negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. And then we need to deal with the product rule. So coefficients, done. Product rule, now we need to multiply the stuff under the radical. So that's our 10 and our 180. 10 and our 18. Getting ahead of myself. 10 times 18 is 180. Now 180 is not a perfect square. So again, I recommend going back to your cheat sheet. When you're looking for your perfect squares, 180 actually has a couple of different perfect square factors. It's important to try to find the biggest one. 36 is the biggest perfect square factor of 180. If you go and play with some of the ones smaller than 36, you'll also find that 9 is a perfect square factor. The reason we want to pick the biggest one is because that guarantees the least amount of work. We only have to make one level in our tree instead of 2. So we can take that 180 and break it up into 36. And it's 36 times 5. That'll get us 180. Again, the 36 is the important part. That's our perfect square. That's the one that comes off the cheat sheet. So 36, the square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 5 is not a nice number. So the root 5 just tags along for the ride. And we don't want to forget that coefficient. There's still a negative 6 on the outside of our radical. That negative 6 is still there. And keep in mind, this was all multiplication. So we have a negative 6 times 6 is negative 36. Root 5. That's it. So far we've only looked at square roots. We also want to be able to do this with cube roots. So let's take a look at a cube root example before you try some on your own. Notice we have the same index. We're good to multiply here. And we, once again, have some coefficients. So let's take care of those first, multiplying the coefficients. 2 times 5 is 10. And then using the product rule, we multiply the stuff on the inside. So 9 times negative 24 is going to be a negative 216. Again, that's just multiplying the numbers underneath the radicals. If there was a negative under a square root, we would worry. But we can take the cube root of a negative number. That is no problem at all. So the cube root of negative 16, we don't even have to do any crazy simplifying here. That's a nice whole number. The cube root of negative 216 is negative 6. So 10 times negative 6, no worries there. We actually get a nice whole number. Albeit negative, that's much nicer than some of our previous answers. So this is multiplying with no variables. Try some of these out on Math Excel, see if you're struggling with the simplifying or keeping things straight. What's a coefficient? What's a radicand? Definitely raise your hand if you have questions on any of these examples or anything on Math Excel. When we pick back up, we're going to throw some variables into the mix, and that'll definitely bump it up from medium to spicy.